Howdy everybody. I'm in the chicken house here and we have the chicken house on steroids going. I made a few videos about this quite a while ago now, but you can go back and take a look at those, at the philosophy behind it and everything. But basically we're composting in the chicken house and we're using the chickens to help us to compost. Now this is all material that we brought. It was a little more than 40 wheelbarrows full of bedding from the sheeps that was in the greenhouse that we had to clean out because we're going to start growing in there. So this is all that stuff and we're composting it. So what you know about composting is you want to have a pretty big ratio between the browns, the stuff that's already dead, like dead grass, dead sticks, dead leaves. You want to have a good, maybe 20-to-1, something like that, ratio between the browns and the greens. Well, we don't have a lot of green right now. We have enough so that I could get some, but I don't have to, because all of these browns are loaded with sheep pee and sheep poop. And of course there's chicken poop on there now as well. So I have plenty of nitrogen in the pile here, so I don't have to worry about it. But I'm moving it every couple days. This type of grass that we have is very difficult to break down, but it does break down eventually, so you just have to be patient. And here's Griseldo. Griseldo has been with us the longest. There's a number of other roosters in here. So I'm moving the pile. It's composting pretty well. You know, when you're doing this, many people you could see on videos will just get after this as fast as they can and they'll just shovel it over and shovel it over. What you want to do is fluff it up. When you take the pitchfork full of stuff, you want to fluff that up a little bit to get plenty of oxygen in there. Otherwise, you wind up with an anaerobic pile. And you don't want that because that's the stinky one. This pile smells fine. Okay, Griseldo. Then we want to water this. You want to water it enough so that if you take a handful and you squeeze it, a little bit of water will come out, not much. Watch out there, Griseldo. The two things you need for successful composting are oxygen and water, because that's what the microorganisms that are going to do the work, that's what they need. They need oxygen and water. And you don't want to have too much water, because then you'll drown the microorganisms and wind up killing a lot of them. And you don't want to have not enough, because then they'll die of thirst. More water. You always want to get some water on the sides as well, because if you only water the top, the water's just going to go down, straight down, and the sides will be pretty dry. So you want to make sure you get the sides wet and moist. Now while I'm doing this, I want to address something that has been floating around various homesteading circles and permaculture circles as kind of fact. And that is something that my permaculture mentor, Jeff Lawton, said quite a while ago, but it endured. And that is, if you're doing this right, you won't lose anything from your pile. Your pile will be just as big as it was when you first started, once the composting is finished. And because of that statement, many people have faced anxiety because their piles get smaller. And so they think that they're doing something wrong. And I'm here to tell you that Jeff is wrong about this. And I told him so during the permaculture design certificate course that I took, that what he said didn't make any sense. And he agreed with me.
So, let me explain to you why it doesn't make any sense. While I'm shoveling more of this compost up here,
Of course, the chickens are very interested in it. You know, I used to wonder what the chickens were eating when they went into the compost pile like this, because they're very interested in it. And I finally figured it out. There's very small microorganisms that they can eat, but there also are a lot of insect eggs in here. Insects that are part of the composting process, and the chickens like those eggs. And so they're not only eating the insects, they're eating the eggs too. Now you're going to see it as I'm going along here. When I'm finished, this pile is going to be higher, it's going to be bigger. That's cotton there. We have too many roosters in here, but I have to take care of that later. That was Batman.
Batman against
There's Batman
Griselda.
right there. And there's Robin behind him. This is Spider-Man.
All of them are children of Griselda.
Yeah, they're all children of Griselda. What happened was we had one of our ladies here, who's not with us anymore, Negrita, hatched 10 eggs, and 8 of them were males. How about that? Anyway, what I was saying before, a lot of people have had anxiety about this issue of the pile decreasing in size. You keep turning it, the compost process keeps going, you wind up with a smaller pile at the end than the pile was that you started. So let me tell you why that has to be the case. That what Jeff had said, that there would be no reduction in the size, is wrong. Think of this. I'm sure that when you were in school, one of your teachers showed you a picture of a rock that weighs 1 pound and a box full of feathers, and the feathers weigh 1 pound, and asked you, which weighs more, the rock or the feathers? Most children will say the rock, even though they both weigh 1 pound. You know, they look at the rock and they say the rock's heavy. Of course it weighs more. Now this misconception often exists because people confuse 3 different terms that we use in chemistry, and that is weight, volume, and density. So let's take weight. Imagine you're holding an apple in your hand. The force that the apple exerts on your hand, that's weight. It's how heavy an object is. Now let's imagine that you pack up your bags and take a trip to the moon. That apple would feel lighter on the moon because weight depends on gravity, and the gravity on the moon is much less than it is on Earth. Okay? Let's take volume. Now think about the amount of space that apple takes up. If you were to put the apple in a box, the amount of the room that it fills in the box is its volume. Whether you're on Earth or on the moon, the volume of the apple doesn't change because it's about the space that it occupies, not the force that it exerts. Now finally, density is a little bit trickier. So imagine that you have an apple and a piece of lead of the same size in your hands. The lead is going to be a lot heavier, right? That's because the lead is denser than the apple, the same size. Density is how much mass or stuff is packed into a certain volume of space. So even though the apple and the piece of lead take up the same amount of space, the lead has more mass packed into that space, making it denser. In reality, that is exactly what happens with the compost pile. When you first start composting, there's a lot of air in the pile. There's a lot of sticks and other stuff like that don't compress down very easily, and so you don't have a compressed pile. But as things are changing, and there's dynamic chemistry going on in the compost pile. So it isn't just that, when you finish with the compost, you don't wind up with this, with a bunch of bedding. You wind up with something that looks like soil. Maybe you still have a few stragglers of grass in there, but most of it looks like soil. The material has been chemically changed by the microorganisms. And so why would you expect that it would have exactly the same volume that it had when it was a plant standing up, maybe a corn stalk or something else? No, it won't have that. It will decrease in volume, but the absolute weight will be exactly the same. So in that respect, Jeff was right. And if he had said the absolute weight of the pile will be the same, I wouldn't have had an objection. But he said the size. The size deals with the volume, and the volume has to change. Otherwise, there would not be the kind of chemical reactions happening inside it that we know do. So if you've been composting yourself and thinking that you've been doing something wrong because your pile gets smaller as time goes on, you're not doing anything wrong. As a matter of fact, you're probably doing something right, because that means the chemical processes that are breaking down the cellulose and the lignin is all breaking down into more of its component parts. Give the pile a little bit more water. As soon as I'm finished with it, the chickens are going to come and scratch at this and tear it down. I'll come out here tomorrow and the pile will be half the size it was because they've spread it all out. I'll pile it back up again and give it some more water. Every 3 days or so, I give it a good turn like I'm doing now. Now, some of you may write to me and say that, oh, wow, you know, there's lots of people that have done research on composting and there's better ways to do this. Well, what I say to that is, yes, I could have a compost thermometer here measuring the temperature, but I've done this enough so that I basically kind of know what's going to happen, and I don't really have to watch it that closely, because for me, what I'm after is not the best compost in the world. I'm simply looking for what's good enough for me. Yeah, it probably isn't perfect, but it's good enough. You see, and the chickens agree with me. They agree with me. Okay, Cotton. So it's good enough. So with that, I'm going to end the video here. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.